Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I'm so grateful that you're here. This is the Daily Medicine Transmission for August 5th, 2021. Our sun is still in Leo and moon is now and has been in Cancer. We'll be in Cancer all day today. Will not go void, of course, until tomorrow evening. So we have a full day of the moon, our moon, right? Not the moon, our moon, in its home territory. She is in Cancer, and we're going to see in today's reading how much this is really at the heart of where we are. So as within, so without. We've been talking the last day or so about this inner journey that is being triggered right now. So if you go to social media, you'll see day 4 of the Reiki Attunement Commitment, and it's really starting to get very much into those deeper spaces. As we pull away the layers, it gets deeper and deeper. And a moon in Cancer, especially a balsamic moon in Cancer, this is a really good time to go deep within, to allow yourself to sink deep within, so you can see what's going on down in the realms that are often hidden from our conscious awareness. And if we want to be conscious co-creators of our experience, of our reality, if we want to be the magicians that manifest our reality as we see it as the highest version of it, we actually do have to be also conscious of the space within in which to create. And this is what this transmission is really going to put some attention to today. So welcome back. If you are a subscriber or a regular viewer, I thank you so much. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. And if you're new here, welcome. Thank you for being here. And as always, whenever you interact with content like this from independent content creators, regardless of what platform you find yourself on, it does actually influence the rate of suggestion and the spread of this content to a larger audience. When you subscribe, when you like, when you comment, when you share this content, it actually does signal to the AI overlords that this information is in the benefit of all to suggest to a wider audience. So thank you for supporting what's going on here, and let's get right into it. Let's get out of studio mode here. Okay, welcome everyone. So let's see, the Schumann has come back down to its baseline for the most part, and it's been blacked out. So from, I would say, for the last 8 hours, according to the sources that I utilize, it's been blacked out for a while. So we really don't know what's happening. But what I will say is that there are a number of solar holes in the magnetic field of the sun that have released solar winds. They're going to be landing about tomorrow. So as we go through an entire day of our moon in Cancer in her home territory and really just sinking into this process of inner metamorphosis, of getting deeper into the inner realms, how important that really is if we want to manifest and see the world outside of us as a reflection of our inner stability and our inner divinity. Then we have to actually be willing to go into that space to understand what's happening there. So we are going to get another gust of solar wind by tomorrow. And of course, the Lionsgate new moon is going to be on the 8th. And that's really going to set the tone for a whole new cycle, right? Of especially when it comes to sovereign individuals standing in their power, standing in their full expression of who they are on the outside, right? The sun being the expressive part of our personality in full union with divine source, right? The Kundalini energy releasing, surging, the blood pumping through the body, which is really the vehicle for the chi, according to Chinese medicine. And even in Ayurveda too, the blood is so important in the whole cardiovascular system. Our heart is an electromagnetic pump or electrical pump, creating a magnetic frequency as well. So there's so much wrapped up in this imagery, but suffice it to say, this new moon is going to allow us to set the intention of participating in a feeling of togetherness as each of us stands in our fullness, in our full power and our full expression, allowing our passion to move through us to create this beautiful harmony and resonance that will be really the real intention to set aside for this entire lunar cycle that we're coming up on. But now that we're in the balsamic moon before that phase, it's important that we are consolidating, that we are getting very deep within. And a balsamic Cancer moon, even better, to really just sink very deeply. We've been, kind of in this fantasy realm, very dreamy. Our artistic tendencies, our love, our tenderness has really been something that we've been trying to act through and cultivate. And we're going to just, let's just get right into the reading. Let's get right into the reading so we can see what came through today and what kind of transmission, symbolism here that I can impart upon all of us. So I hope everyone is doing well, taking good care. This is, like I said, this is really a good time to get into those practices that allow you to go very deeply into the subconscious, to see what's going on there, and to embark on that stillness. It is really what's under the surface that is having so much of an impact on what's going on. So as we see, we have this incredibly feminine horizontal axis today of the Princess of Cups, and here's our High Priestess at the center of it all today. And then we have the Star card, which is the Aquarian card, but it's also reversed. So there is an expectation on some level that when it's coming from this point of the Princess of Cups, which we'll go into in detail, of course, as this kind of fantasy, dreamy, the innocent aspect, somewhat immature, but also too not conditioned as much by all of the outside forces yet. You can see this Princess of Cups here is offering something, right? And she's in this flow, very, very beautiful flow, very flowing, very watery. Obviously, we're talking about the cups. The Princess of Cups is like an island to herself out in the formless field of experience into the ocean. So it is this endless tenderness, kindness, and loving. Remember, Venus in the water signs is what the Princess of Cups represents. And as we get deeper into this reading, we're going to see that the impact here, or the likely effect as we go very deep, right? The High Priestess is the much more esoteric, mystery, darker version of the divine feminine archetype. And we talked about Black Moon Lilith that was in conjunction with Algol, still is in within a 1 degree orb of Algol in late Taurus. This is the Pleiadian territory as well. This is giving that part of ourselves over to the highest good, right? When we hold that part of ourselves that is this deeply rooted divine feminine archetype, this aspect that is so deep within ourselves that we don't often know that it's even at work, just like our subconscious, and even something deeper, the subconscious of the human collective. Even when we are unaware of the toxicity of our trauma coming to the surface and impacting things, if we're unaware of it, if we are unconscious to it, if we are avoiding it, if we are feeding it in a negative way as well, right? When we use that shadow work as a way to kind of when we use that concept of shadow work to really just give license to that part of ourselves to kind of run rampant, this is when we run into trouble. And we are going to see it very clearly as we go into the High Priestess's domain, because she is Moon in Scorpio in the 12th house. This is the lunar consciousness in the deepest mysteries here. So Venus, the Princess of Cups, is just kind of on the surface, right? She's her own little island, Venus representing the earth, the fixed earth, her own little island along the vastness of the collective unconscious. And artistically inclined talents that can be supported. This is a beautiful, when we go deep into these realms and we are not prepared to just accept what is and be very real with ourselves. And it gets harder as the moon is in her very waning phase, just days away from this new moon, which she's at her darkest. This is territory that can be very murky. And when we have an expectation here of this Star card, even in its reversal, this card is so beautiful, not only because they have this feminine archetype also related to the Star card, and it shows us that there may be a mistake in our code, right? There's an error in our feeling, which is what we use to have cosmic coherence, is the feeling oriented aspect of ourselves. So the way we feel so sure about may not be quite right, but it's going to be about coming into this space very deeply in order to address these illusions. Because the Princess of Cups, for as much as she is so tender and kind and loving, and as much as that there is a fertile and rich island of possibility here, and the deeper insights that can be gained, she's still on the surface, and she's willing to explore these inner worlds. And there's a lot of intuition. There's, like I said, fantasy, dreamy imagination. Well, that kind of goes all out the window when we hit the High Priestess, because this is the realm of the deep. Like I said, deeper and much more subtle aspects of the feminine archetype. This is addressing the current axis of our heart, space, of our energetic and material reality crossing over into our heart space. And we can see that the cardinal has already come out to address this issue. So the divine feminine is in fact still coming. It's coming into form. There's nothing that's stopping this. This is part of the shifting in the magnetics. Right? This is about the shifting of the polarity in some ways. And here it is right on the surface. This is darkness, mystery, the psychic power. And this is about going into the subconscious realm, right? You can see that she, in fact, is behind a veil, right? A grid in some way. So she's not completely in this full awareness. There is a veil that passes in front of exposure to the fullness and the wholeness of this divine feminine archetype, the moon, right? The High Priestess, the planet, quote unquote, associated with it is the moon, right? And so here we are. So suppressing the subconscious means we'll never understand ourselves, and we need to get into the inner wisdom at its absolute deepness. Now, this can elicit feelings of fear, feelings of darkness, right? Feelings that we can never pull ourselves out. But remember, the moon is in Cancer. This is her home territory. That means that there is a core that we can tap into that stabilizes us, that contains us, that holds us and protects us, right? That's the Cancerian archetype, is the protection that is given to our character and our personality by the lattice structure of our familial bonds. And that can be our spiritual family, that can be our actual family of origin, our current family that we are cultivating. It could be our tribal identity, our regional identity, our clan identity, our national identity, right? All of these Cancerian elements of what protects us, the most vulnerable parts of ourselves. And this is where the moon is able to really be in her power. It's that she is now at her most dark in the next couple of days. So we're really going to, there's support, and there is the Princess of Cups. We ourselves are that island in our sensitivity to the vast fluid realm of the conscious, the unconscious collective. We have a lot of potential here, but coming into this moment now really sets us up to kind of jump into the water from the island itself and just sink in, right? Sink down, because the subconscious is where it's all happening. And I addressed this today in the update for the Reiki, the 21 days of Reiki attunements that's on social media. And you can link to that from the description box below. So here's our heart of the matter here. The axis between our spiritual, energetic nature and the material world is that it's essential that we go within. And this is not a new message. This is not a new message at all. This is just bringing it back to, especially come tomorrow, tonight into tomorrow, the moon's gonna cross the point of the new moon that we're still in the cycle of. And so we will be, have an opportunity to reconnect at the deepest levels, what it was that we initiated with that new moon, what kind of seeds of intention were planted when it comes to our acceptance of the sanctification of productive relationships within us. And it's the productive relationship of a marriage, for instance. This is just a way to wrap your mind around it, because the Sabian symbol is a priest performing a marriage ceremony. The marriage is the commitment in a sacred manner, sanctifying this relationship that will eventually produce progeny, right? It will create something new, but it has to start with a commitment to the container in order for this to happen, and to allow it to, find its center and its stabilization. So we're going to have a chance to reconnect with that as we finish out this cycle and start focusing on this Lionsgate portal and this new moon in Leo, which is much more about the eruption and the release of that energy of passion and creativity within each of us that we will eventually be drawn to bringing together into a sense of togetherness, right? It's the idea that we can see in that moment how each of us is able to meet ourselves in our fullness, and then apply that to some sort of collective situation that will create something bigger than ourselves, of course, but also be harmonious. And it really epitomizes, I guess, or puts up, shows us the highest potential of togetherness, when the harmony that can be brought about as a result. So when we look at what's going on underneath the surface here, speaking of the subconscious, speaking of where we pull our power in from, oh boy, the 5 of Keys, wishes fulfilled. So it has come, the time has come for the dreams to be realized, whatever they are, right? This is suggesting that all of the things that we need are right here. It's just a matter of harnessing them. So at the very base here in our subconscious, where we draw our power from, such strong Cancerian elements here, it's the keys to the castle have always been ours. It's a matter of figuring out what actually is the castle for each of us and collectively. And if we can really figure out what the castle is on an individual level, from a divine perspective, from a sanctified perspective, this is a great place to root ourselves. Now, when our wishes of materialism are just based on materialism, this is going to lead to problems, of course, right? Because as we see at the cardinal at the top of our reading today, that is one of the pieces of guidance from the animals. And every time I pull a card from this deck, the thing that goes through my mind, the mantra that continues to be repeated as I pull these particular animal cards, is that the animals are God's messengers, right? They are providing the messages, the synchronicities, the guidance in some ways, because they are living in their full innocence, right? They are not bifurcated because of their consciousness. It's not because they're not sentient. It's just because they're living in their innocence in some ways. And so the messages that come through them are always divine, as far as I'm concerned. So, and then we have the cardinal here that is showing us about the living in the two polarities and having them be separated. There is a out of balance here. So if the wishes fulfilled is what we are plugging into that has to do strictly with materialism, then yeah, we're going to have an error in the code that we're going to have to come to terms with. If we are acknowledging that the wishes are still, they're here, we have access to them, but with materialism, it takes actual time for things to unfold, doesn't it? And there are still things to be working on, and there is a potential loss. We see the 7 of Keys is reversed. We have the elk, which is signaling that we really have to stand in our power to address feelings of defeat and despair. So it depends here. It depends on what our wishes being fulfilled, and maybe it's going to take a roundabout way rather than a direct route, depending on what those wishes are. And it takes time, right? It takes time. Maybe we have to have some maybe things have to fall apart before we can actually create the space for this to happen. Maybe we don't have room for this to come in. Either way, this is still what is happening here at the root energetically that we are drawing our power from. And as it moves up to the heart of us, which is this very deep mystery, right? The essence of the subconscious realm, we come up and we see that we definitely want to be nurturing it. The Queen of Roses, again, there's so much femininity in this reading today. Like, and with the moon in Cancer, like it's really about going within and just being still in that space and providing ourselves with the tools and the commitment to a routine or a habit that will condition this vessel in some ways. So our conscious awareness here through all of this is being loving and supportive and passionate. See, that's the thing. The Princess of Cups is tender and kind, and there's a fertile land here, an island, amidst all of the unconscious collectives, manifestations, and all of the, especially with Neptune here. It's very powerful. And so there's a lot of deeper insights and the exploration. And now we're going very deep within. And so our conscious awareness and focus and really what we can contribute to through this energetic polarity here, this vertical axis, is to be this loving and supportive divine feminine. Either bring it into our awareness, either finding it in other people, maybe stepping into this role ourselves in some way. This is a loving connection. Relationships with someone, relationships can deepen with this card. They can become more meaningful. I mean, this is a queen that is very focused on, it's the water of the water. And it's important to be open to a new connection if that's the case. If it's deepening one that's already here, that's important too. We may be stepping into a role as a mother or some other feminine or female archetypal role. And there is, a happy resolution to a difficulty with a loved one. And we had seen a lot of Archangel Raphael, like presenting himself to come in if asked and creating the space for it. And so I think that that space has been created and now it's just deepening, and we have an opportunity to go much deeper and to, again, really express our conscious attention here and what's in our contribution in some ways to a peaceful and loving connection. But there's a lot of us that is encapsulated in this reading in terms of our reception into the feminine archetype, receiving, being still, surrendering, all of the feminine aspects, the yin phase. We talked about this already, going into the yin phase. And so the Queen of Roses is not very active. If you can see, she's in her stillness, but she's holding something and addressing her attention to it very lovingly. And so whatever that is, it's going to be what's here at the root, which is our wishes fulfilled, right? Our wishes fulfilled. And so we can still be lovingly focused on whatever that is in ourselves, while at the same time acknowledging the surrounding guidance that's going to help with what seems to me will be kind of an inevitable addressing of the illusions, right? Because when the star is reversed, the star card in and of itself as the Aquarian card is the guiding light, hope and trust and optimism in nature. And we do have this optimism in nature if we are surrendering to our metamorphosis. So Jupiter in Aquarius is a big part of this card. Confidence and long sight. Jupiter is in Aquarius right now. It's about to retrograde back into the next degree, which is about the metamorphosis, the exiting of the chrysalis. So we have to go in deep to really understand the error in our code, or the mistake in the code, right? Because it's only within the subconscious that we understand where the code is really embedded. It might come through the pineal gland. It might come through the sun and receiving these activations, and there will be more. I mean, like I said, that solar weather is about to come in and hit Earth in the next day, and so there's going to be another round. Who knows if it's going to be strong or not? I mean, what we do know at this point is that solar weather that in the past had not had a lot of geomagnetic unrest is causing way more. And I would say, based on my research and the information that I engage with, that the magnetic field is weakening, right? Here is all of the natural setup for this great solar flash. But anyway, we have to get in deeply in order to make sure that the code is not corrupted in some way, right? If there's a virus on the system, that's going to corrupt the code that comes in. If there are subconscious programs and that we aren't even aware of, we don't get access to it without going deep in and doing the work, right? We don't get access to that code unless we are willing to be still and surrender and go deep. And this is what we're being invited to do with this balsamic moon in Cancer right now. I would say that we're being invited. It's up to us whether or not we participate. And so, like I said, here we have the star card, this beautiful starlight, and another feminine figure here where she's bathing herself in starlight and also offering it back to the world. It is the idea that the light of the universe, the cosmic coherence, moves through the collective, and each of us is a nodal point that is infused with this light. And so there is this give and take that is being shown and symbolized in this card of starlight. Our sun is a star, and there are billions of them everywhere. So what the sun represents in terms of an individual shining forward is an example of the entire universe doing the same thing with all these different billions and billions and billions, uncountable stars throughout our entire universe. But it's reversed, which is suggesting to me that we have to be willing to not only go within this space in ourselves, right? Jupiter is retrograde in Aquarius, so that can be this expansion and this identification of the code and the optimism and trust in the code within us, right? Especially if we are in a space of metamorphosis, If we're in a space of metamorphosis within ourselves, then yes, absolutely. But the other side of this is that because of an incredible amount of sensitivity, and because we are in fact rooted in this manifestation of our highest wishes, which is not material, but it's spiritual. And it's actually both. If we bring the spiritual into material form, we can draw our power from here. We can embody this role and hold ourselves like this Queen of Roses is holding this flower, giving it loving attention. And either way you look at it, there's something that's going to have to be addressed in a deeper way. The mistake in the code, the error in our feeling, and we don't get to see that unless we go deep within the subconscious. And so this is why a commitment, 21-day commitment, just like the if you check out the post for day 4, somebody had pointed it out to me that and you can just look it right up. How long does a caterpillar stay in their cocoon? 5 to 21 days, right? So 21 days is in fact like naturally coded for metamorphosis in a really obvious example. So, but we have to address what is off, and we can't do that without going within. So the star card is giving us this likely impact here of all this energy swirling around. And so even in reversal, the star card is so beautiful. It's a gentle nudge, really. It's just like, hey, now that you can feel into this whole thing, maybe you can see where there is disruption or error or mistakes in the code and be able to correct that within ourselves. So the guidance here is very interesting, because it really does suggest if we're having a hard time aligning with some of this stuff, right? So the ascent, the 7 of keys, so it's very material in terms of where we're grounding and rooting ourselves into this manifestation of the material. The ascent is pretty self-explanatory, but when it's reversed, it's the same thing. You're kind of falling off the mountain here. It can indicate a loss of a position, a sudden departure, a fall from grace in your reputation or career expectations, right? Because we are talking about the keys to the kingdom. So we are talking about the nuts and bolts of our material reality here, access to our material reality. And so sometimes, we fall from grace, or like I said, in reputation, we are challenged in some way in our expectations of material concerns or career, really efforts that don't pay off. This is about being aware of that, working hard to reach a higher position, but it keeps eluding us. That's another way that this reversal can express itself. And specific outcomes may be harder to realize right now. And your efforts are not acknowledged by others. This is a really, that in itself can lead people down the pathway of darkness and not even realizing it. When they feel entitled to be acknowledged, if they need some sort of outside recognition of what they're doing, the work they're doing, especially the inner work, this can lead people to be hyper fixated on the material representation of the work that they're doing. And this can lead people to act out in some ways to get that, because they don't have the mechanisms developed within themselves to find that affirmation or acknowledgement by others. And so that's important to realize too. So if you find yourself making long-term efforts without any reward in sight, it's possible there's an error in the code. Okay, the code that is from, the program, the code that was used to program your subconscious, and then everything else builds from there. Maybe it's time to go into that and realize that there's something off there. Oh boy. And the elk, of course, along with that, is saying in the face of these disappointments, in the face of sudden loss, departure, whatever it is, the fall from grace, whatever is the challenge that knocks you off of your pathway up the mountain, it's important that we stand in our power and fully be present and stand tall in the face of these feelings of defeat and despair, right? You have to actually be able to embody the confidence in the face of being beat down or the fall from grace, right? And so this is bringing this to our awareness. And so for those, we want to, and we are in fact drawing our power from this wishes fulfilled. The keys to the kingdom are ours, and we want to create the space. We want to have the space in order for these manifestations to come into our reality. But there is something off here, and we may have already experienced it. We may be coming to an awareness now with the moon in Cancer to really get deep into our intuition and that psychic channel in our inner life in order to understand it. And then we have to step in. It's not so much fake it till you make it, but you have to actually embody this confidence and dignity if you want to get the respect that you deserve. And again, this goes back to this idea that you're working hard, but you're not being acknowledged for it. If you want to be acknowledged and get respect, you have to respect yourself and stand firm so that you are so big and tall that you are seen for who you are, and that you get the respect that we all deserve, right? Just as by virtue of being a human being on earth. But sometimes we want more than that. And so this is saying we have to step into it and actually embody that if we want other people to acknowledge it. And so that will lead people to fulfill, to act out the errored code in some way. If there is any kind of, if there's any leak in that Cancerian container, if there's any damage to that armor in some ways, if it's more of a sieve and not a crab shell, then yeah, you're going to leak yourself all over the place. So we have to embody this dignity no matter what, if we want to, in fact, be able to exhibit it to the rest of the world. And we need to respect ourselves if we expect anybody else to respect us, right? And here is the cardinal at the top here. The polarities of spiritual and physical are out of balance. This is the essence of what we're here to do, is to bring the spiritual consciousness into full material form. This is what our pathway really is. So we can do it through technology and artificial intelligence, which is one pathway that's happening, or we can bring our consciousness into our material form and awaken that way. Either way, we're still living in this bifurcation within us, right? It's just expressed outside of us because we're all still living with it, right? The bifurcation between our spiritual and our material, right? This is something that we have to work on unifying. And if we do that, then we will find that humanity starts to unify, that we will start to wake up to the domination and the real trap of the bifurcation that is being foisted upon us. Once we once we eliminate that within our own self, then we're going to see it expressed outside of us. Again, this is why this work is so important, rather than really trying to do and do and do. And it's important that you're active and you're informed, but at the same time, it's really just as important that we are doing our spiritual work. And this is not new. We've been talking about this especially since Saturn and Pluto were in a conjunction in January 2020. We knew that was the beginning of the end. So if you haven't started by that point, it's okay. It's never too late, but you have to at least acknowledge it so that you can start working towards it. And of course, here we go with the Akashic Library again, right? Second day in a row. It's about moving into deeper self-awareness of our divine nature. It's the same as the High Priestess. It's number 2, right? It's the divine feminine. It's the stillness. It is the space. It's going into the mysteries of who we are in order to not only rewrite it, but to understand how we bring our spiritual material form together. So a lot of very deep opportunities today. And what I think is really helpful in this moment is to realize that you don't direct the course of your well, we kind of do, because that's part of being human, is that we have the capacity to direct the course of our own evolution. That is the blessing and the curse of humanity, is being awake, right? Being conscious co-creators. But there is no manifestation without a space in which to do so. And that space is our subconscious. And we have to go into that space and really be familiar with it, to look into our own abyss and to acknowledge it if we really want to manifest and fulfill our material wishes of where we all want to go, which is an awakened human population that is living heaven on earth, basically. So lots to work with here, lots and lots to work with. So let's look at the chart today to see how the actual transits are supporting this process as well, or challenging it. It could go either way. Let's see what we got going here. All right. Yes, I see what's happening. All right, here is our chart for today, guys. It is the 5th of August, isn't it? I'm going to check in with the chat real quick and make sure everything's streaming appropriately. Yes, and yes, and yes. All right, so here we are. Our moon is in, like I said, our moon is in Cancer. We'll be in Cancer all day. So let's move back a couple hours here to overnight. We can see where the moon and Mars are in a sextile. Venus now officially in the second half here of Virgo, so it's gone from the character to the actual education and training part. We've kind of moved past this, this potentially dramatic release that Venus represents in Virgo, the volcanic eruption that is really repressed energy that needs an outlet, and will likely be very destructive if there is not an outlet in order for it to move through. And now we're in a point where the inner guidance is, again, here's our moon in Cancer, here's a High Priestess. Our inner guidance is now being directed to... Our inner guidance is starting to come online, and it's important to realize who's doing the guiding. And so that's also why getting into the error mistakes in the code are important, because it may not have been a mistake for whoever put the code there, but we have to acknowledge that it is not going to allow for us to manifest exactly what we want right now. And so we have to be aware of that too. And Venus is very sensitive to the material world. And so through our relationships, through our projects, through our material resources, to whatever we harmonize with, we're going to start feeling where all of those types of situations are going to show us and give us insight into inner guidance and who is actually doing the guiding. It's like a Ouija board, right? You just have to be very aware that whatever you call in is not something that you can necessarily control, which is kind of the downside of all of it, black magic, it's not even kind of the downside. It is, in fact, you're playing a dangerous game at that point, right? When you bring in this energy. And so you have to have a really a strong level of adeptness, I think. And even when you do, you risk pulling in all kinds of stuff. So, that's something that we can address at a different point. Specifically, I think we really should look at Crowley's chart. I think I'd really like to do that as a teaching mechanism, and also to show, what's in his chart that would support and kind of showcase, the pathway that he took, right? And so then it gives us an idea of how those things are present in our own charts and how we manage them. So, all right. Here we go. So the moon is, as you see, sextile with Mars in Virgo. So we have the Cancer moon in a sextile to Mars. And so, when you come into Cancer as an archetype, there is this very distinct reorientation of our priorities, right? You kind of lower the flag and raise the new one, right? You've made a decision of where you are rooting yourself. And so in the first kind of couple degrees, right, the first couple days of Cancer, that very, that first 5 degrees really, it's still kind of working out what that feels like in sense of, you've gone from this mutable air of Gemini into a very definitive, rooted Cancer energy that is protected and has a shell around it. And so there's still kind of like this back and forth of trying to eventually come into an awareness, even more than an awareness, coming into accept and embody the stabilization of the Cancerian archetype. So in the meantime, it's still kind of like back and forth. So this degree of Cancer is like a cat arguing with a mouse. It's just like, here, let me justify all of these things that that I'm naturally compelled to do, which is the cat chasing the mouse, right? The cat's arguing with the mouse because the mouse is like, no, you don't want to do that. It's like a Tom and Jerry thing. You can really see it play out. And so the sextile, right? 60-degree angle. This is an opportunity to invest these energies. I'm so sorry. Excuse me. I talk so much and then it just gets so irritated in my throat. So I need some fisherman's friends. The sextile here, Mars in Virgo, right? We're at a point now where we are acknowledging on some level that, this interplay of polarity coming to dance together happily, right? Virgo is also ruled by Mercury, and part of Virgo is discrimination, and not in the way that is, triggers a certain type of discrimination. It's very much based on the idea that we have to be able to discriminate form from form, right? But that doesn't mean that form from form don't interact with each other. And so even though on some level we are kind of adjusting ourselves emotionally and in our feeling base, right, of what's going on, I'm just like, no, it's not really what's happening here. Let me justify this reorientation. We can invest this energy into our warrior energy, the divine masculine that wants to actualize itself, that's in a place where it's now using that energy of action and actualization and desire, really. Mars represents the potency and desire of Aries. We can see that just because there's discrimination, we can tell the difference between this and that. That doesn't mean that they don't work together, right? And I think that we can apply this to where the moon is, that is still adjusting in some ways and justifying this reorientation within ourselves. And it's like, just because there is a distinct separation and bifurcation doesn't mean that there's not the potential for unification within ourselves. And we can apply this on a personal level to our emotional landscape that I think is, has been kind of like, there's a certain amount, like I said, the cat arguing with the mouse, right? Trying to justify what is now just what is the containment system for our own character and personality to develop. So there's an investment right there. The moon comes into a square Then with asteroid Vesta, who is in Libra, is in fact the communal fire now, in which we are all gathering around. We're finding communion, spiritual communion with each other around the hearth flame that sustains and supports a community, a family. Vesta is the flame of the community or the family, the hearth flame that provides everything, heat and cooking and a sense of cohesion, the spirit, the campfire that we're all around. But the moon here in this in Cancer in a square here is really challenging this, because this position is like, we're going to start individually kind of, you know, playing around and playing pretend, right? This is where we start to as more basic beings, right? Younger children in some ways, we start to model the adults in our life, and we start to model the emotional relationships that, or we start to inhabit and pretend the emotional relationships that are modeled to us. And so we're kind of like, okay, I see how this goes. And I'm going to start like dressing up and playing this part. And the square to Vesta is like, you know, that's, you know, we're each doing that. But the friction here is also with the idea that the form of relationship is based on some sort of central unifying factor that we can all come together around. And so this is definitely, I mean, this is what's happening, you know, this as of this morning. So, and trying to figure out like where we each individually are stabilized, what's in our subconscious versus this real strong draw to pull around the central fire that supports us all, the spark that of transformation, the essence that sustains us collectively. We are, you know, because that pulls us away in some ways. Because remember, Cancer is about the individual development. So it does kind of, and the moon is about our individual adaptability, you know, how we feel on the inside. So we are working with this while at the same time, the cross purposes of the larger form and the community, right? The center of the community that sustains it, whatever, the spiritual fire, right? We find real communion as we move around it. So that's an interesting dynamic for today. And then the moon comes into a quincunx at the same time with asteroid Juno, which is in conjunction with Antares, which is in conjunction with K2, the south node. And so that means that the moon is also in a quincunx to the south node, right? I mean, that would make the most sense at that point, is in a quincunx to the south node. And so again, there's that opportunity for adjustment. You're not going to see it but it's strong, just like this quincunx to Saturn is strong. It's right here. And so Juno is now direct, sitting on the heart of the Scorpion. She represents our contractual obligations, our commitments, you know, for better or for worse, the betrayal that is part of it and what we do about it, right? Juno, she does not hold back. And when she feels she has been abused or betrayed by her husband, which is Zeus, right, she will act out. And especially on K2, right, there is this propensity here to want to hold the hand of others and lead them through this process. There is or drag them through this process. You know what I mean? It's like a really frustrated and pissed off mom that's just like, I don't have time to wait for my toddler to, you know, shimmy their way up this staircase. I'm literally just going to drag them, right? And sometimes that, you know, there's no judgment about that. That's just an image to wrap your head around. Decades ago, I used to work at a camp, like a high adventure outdoor camp that was really meant to hook up at-risk younger people with high school mentors, and they formed their bonds by going through a week of this camp. And we did all kinds of stuff, you know, caving, and we had a rock wall and rappelling and backpacking. And we had a group of girls who were actually much older, and they were in the system, right? And so we were the mentors as the counselors. They weren't getting hooked up with younger kids to be their mentors. And I literally dragged this 12-year-old girl for miles on our backpacking trip, miles, all day. And she cried and she cried and she cried. And she was 15 years old and she was crying like a child. And when we got to the end, I just would not let her give up. And when we got to the end and we set up camp and we set up the fire, she was like, that was the most amazing thing I've ever done, right? This whole thing that built all of their self-esteem, and they challenged themselves and all this stuff. And so that's also one way to think about it. But Juno is pretty rough. And she, like I said, she's the queen. She is in charge of, she is the queen of all of the deities, right? And so when she is slighted or she sees any imbalance, betrayal, she's going to act on it. And the heart of the Scorpion, oh, it is deep. It is so deep and it's so painful. And so to have the moon and a quincunx here, same thing, right? We on some level are kind of like the child, right? We just want to like explore what's around us, and put our hand into the water and see what we pull out. It's very innocent. It's very, naive, right? It's a naive quest for knowledge, even though we're just kind of, we don't understand yet that it's this formless, endless space that we're going into, but we still, need to have the space to do it. And this is where that quincunx is like going to, express itself into some sort of fall from grace. Maybe we fall into the pond as we're reaching down in there, right? Maybe we see something or grab something that we don't really like, right? You grab something slimy down there, but it is a sort of naive type of energy. The quincunx is that with Juno and Ketu involved, there's such a strong pull to want to balance the scales out of authority and to, really because of how absolutely powerful this betrayal is. And then this is where the momentum of K2, right? This is where we're leaving behind this energy of feeling responsible for pulling everybody else up. We each have to have the opportunity to reach into our own subconscious and to dig around, and maybe we, like I said, maybe we pull up something slimy, maybe we fall in, maybe we see nothing. It doesn't, but we have to have the ability to do this on our own in a very personal way. And this quincunx today is going to really challenge us because these two things don't fit with each other. But I would recommend that we allow this inconjunct to, bring in some sort of wild card, right? Some sort of divine intervention. And that the ascent, the 7 of keys that is reversed, that is a wild card all day, right? So it's important that we allow for this and allow ourselves to kind of mess around, to feel around, and to be kind of naive and innocent about it. So, because what happens after this, again, is another quincunx. Right after this, the moon comes into a quincunx with Saturn. Saturn retrograde now moved into an even more challenging position of Aquarius, which is basically seeing people for who they are as opposed to seeing them as the screens that we project our own reality onto. This is going to be some serious shit right here. And I talked about it yesterday because this is, really having an impact on my natal chart in a big way. And so this is something that's going to be unfolding over time, right? Because Saturn moves pretty slowly in its transit. And so again, this quincunx right here to the moon in Cancer, again, another inconjunct. So we go from the pull, this naive kind of like, reaching in and trying to pull out knowledge and an understanding of ourselves, even though it's constantly elusive, right? We go in and the water just sifts through our hands, right? There's nothing solid to grab onto, but we're still young and trying to figure it out. So we go in there anyway, and we come out of it. And now this is where it's getting rough, right? This is a diamond, right? A raw diamond that's being cut. And remember that you have to use an incredible amount of pressure and heat in order to shape a diamond, because it is one of the hardest substances that we know, right? It's the structure, the chemical structure of diamond is nothing more than carbon atoms, but carbon atoms are so stable in their own atomic structure that when they are all bound together like that, it is it is so hard, almost impossible to break them apart. And this is why diamond is able to function so well as a semiconductor, as well as it is able to, just like quartz, right? Silicon dioxide, same basic structure as carbon. Silicone is, except it's got a larger field of possibility with its electrons, right? And so it has more connections that it can make to other atoms. But it's still just as balanced, right? And same thing, quartz crystal is a semiconductor. Both of these have piezoelectric effects. Anyway, so within us, on a internal, in our subconscious, like what our subconscious now is getting shaped, and it has to be, exposed to an incredible amount of pressure, right? And heat in order to do that, right? The formless pond that we were naively reaching into now becomes solidified and is being shaped. Again, the quincunx to Saturn, it is so in the process of this shaping, we have to come to terms with the authority and the reality that we are still just people rather than archetypes that we project onto. And when we are ourselves being shaped and molded into this beautiful diamond, into this very precious gem that has all of these properties that are so important to us, this is not an easy, and again, the fall from grace is substantial. This 7 of keys is even more reflected here. And so this, we're coming into this territory right now, as of this morning, or, early this morning, early afternoon, depending on where you are. We're coming into this place now. And so allow it to happen, right? This is your fall from grace is the opportunity for divine intervention. We already saw that with Archangel Raphael. He's made the presence known a number of times now that there is blessings and healing available. And now it's time to really dig in and feel what goes into that. The metamorphosis process is not easy. I can't even imagine that it's comfortable for a caterpillar to literally and completely change its structure. And so this is part of it, but it's within us, right? And Saturn, of course, Saturn retrograde, it's obvious to us, this boundary, this form, this authority that is within us right now is making it very clear and very, providing something that we may not actually think we want, but is in fact is providing something, which is this reality check that people are people. And when we start to address people as people, rather than archetypes to project our own fears, insecurities, our own bifurcation onto, when we can take the lesson of Saturn retrograde right now within us, we're going to be so much better off. And again, the quincunx is that these two things don't seemingly fit, because part of that is we want to be shaped into a precious version of ourselves, and that's not going to come from the projection of our bifurcation out onto the world. Again, it's going to be an inner, and there's going to be some sort of just like slap in the face, I'm sure, about it in some way. That is, either outside of us collectively is going to show us this, and each of us has the opportunity to feel this within our own microcosm of reality. So as we move through, it's squares and quincunxes with the moon all day, so that this is a challenging place to go deep within. And again, the error in the code is going to become very obvious to us as we go through this day. Now, what do we have next? Well, the moon is going to meet Sirius. So starseed activation, my friends, Sirian starseed activation is going to come into a square with Chiron retrograde, okay? So even with this sense of bringing the profane and material into spiritual, which is the essence here of Cancer in general, but also with the Sirian starseeds, for as much as our character can be shaped by our will, right, that we have a flexibility, but a prominence to us that is allowing for us to learn more about ourselves. The square to Chiron, right? Chiron in Aries, retrograde. We've talked about this so many times, that this is about our the woundedness that we feel, the shame and the guilt and all of the victim narratives that come to the surface within us when we are addressing the fact that things are not manifesting on the time. We feel the potential within us, yet we want to push things beyond what they are naturally meant to do, right? The natural unfoldment of the cycle. And so there's frustration, right? We want to change the status quo immediately, yet there is a block there, and that is where the frustration comes from, and that triggers all of this either the savior role, it triggers the victim role, it triggers our identity with that victim role as well. And this friction right here is so important, because we have to realize on some level within us that the material has to be made sacred if we are going to come into any kind of fulfillment of our wishes. This is how we bring the bifurcation back together into some sort of unity or integration within ourselves. And part of that is being flexible, but also prominent enough to learn about ourselves and to bring that material nature into a spiritual form. This is, again, we're gonna meet the new moon that we are still in the cycle of through this waning moon in Cancer. And so this square to Chiron is going to challenge us, and the friction is going to be the friction itself is going to catalyze this change and growth. But we have to lean into it. We have to embody the friction that it's causing, right? Because it's going to bump right up against all of that wounding of self. And it's important that as Syrian starseeds, for instance, if you have Syrian starseed markings, then be mindful that the moon's going to activate this part of yourself even more, and it's going to bump up even more against Chiron, I would say. And so at the same time, the Syrian starseeds can provide an example, can sit in their power of sanctification of the mundane, right? That is their wheelhouse, essentially. And this will, in fact, give us the opportunity to grow and integrate with, you know what I mean? We can give up that identity, which is what Chiron ultimately did. He gave up the identity that was responsible for his feelings of shame and guilt to begin with. And once he did that, he was actually able to heal, when before that, he was constantly living with this victim identity. So what's interesting, this is the end of the day, right? 6:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Then the moon comes into a sextile with Uranus and is still in conjunction with Sirius, by the way. So this is really the capstone of today, this sextile, and still in conjunction with Sirius. So it had a square to Chiron, but is allowing us to invest this energy into where Uranus is, which is the pathway of the collective awakening, our ability to brave the storm. And the storm is a very natural part of is part of a natural cycle. It is an expression of the need to balance out the imbalance in the environment around us. It is the movement towards homeostasis, and Uranus is the collective third eye. So our pathway of collective awakening can be invested into with this moon at Sirius, which again, quite simply, is about making to materialize the concept of fulfillment and spiritual fulfillment specifically. And if we can really wrap ourselves around that, if we can feel that within us, how we feel inside, being our moon, then we can apply this to the collective process of awakening that is really all about our ability to brave the storm, okay, which is a natural part of the cycle. You have to have some sort of release of imbalance if you want to find balance. And this shows us in some ways how we can embody that, that discharge of energy that comes back that allows us to come back to balance. We can embody that within ourselves by making the process sacred. Right? When we see this process as sacred, then it becomes sacred, right? And then when that happens, we are able to we are able to get something from this process of Uranus, which is the collective awakening, and vice versa. That's the thing about the sextile. It's a reconciliation of opposites, right? It is the six-pointed star of two triangles imposed upon each other, one upright, one inverted, right? That is the essence of the sextile, the 60-degree angle, the number 6 in numerology. So by the end, there is so much to be gathered, but we have to allow this process to gain a sacred nature within us if we're really going to make the most out of this connection to Uranus, which is the triggering, like I said, the triggering of mass awakening. And it's coming through the experience of the storm and our relationship to it. So however you want to identify the storm, it's really what it takes in a natural environment to balance what is imbalance, which is a huge discharge of energy. So you can definitely feel that when you live in an environment that's really humid and hot and there are a lot of storms. There was a lot of storms here like 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago too. It just rained every day, thunder, lightning, storming every single day. And you could feel that the heat and the anxiety and the irritation and everything would build. And then it would rain and it would be like, and then it would build again, and then it would rain and be like, So we're kind of past that point, but at the same time, it was a continual reminder of how to navigate this territory. And Uranus is the foe of Saturn, right? Because Uranus is the true ruler of Aquarius, which is about the lightning bolt of energy that moves through the collective, and there's no separating the individual from the collective once you get into Aquarius. And of course, this is where the error in the code can be really intuited with that star card by the time the moon comes into this sextile with Uranus. So my friends, I'm going to leave it there for today. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. If you are interested in a reading or energy work to support your process, you can book through my website. That's linked in the description box below. You can follow Catalyst Energies on Facebook and Telegram if you're interested in keeping track of my 21-day commitment of Reiki attunements, because there's a lot of information that's coming through to be shared, not just for me, but it's meant to be shared with everybody, because this process is a metamorphosis process. So whatever it is you have as your practice, it's a good time to institute it and to commit to it, because in fact, that is how long the chrysalis really lasts, is of 21 days. So metamorphosis takes some time and it takes a commitment. And once you're in the cocoon, that's it, right? You're not coming back out until it's time. So might as well embrace this process and get the most out of it. So I will be with you tomorrow. What's today? Thursday. Today is Thursday. So tomorrow we're going to have the new moon report with the broadcast, and we're going to talk about the new moon in Leo. We're going to talk about the entire lunar cycle, what to expect. Ooh, boy, it's a big one. And at the very least, and we will have your weekly study guide coming out for starting with Sunday on the new moon, and then going at least through the week. So utilize those tools, see what comes out and speaks to you, take notes, do your own research, do your own study with the astrological transits and see what comes out, because that's really the most important thing, is how we are each addressing this time for ourselves. And when we do that, then we see it manifested outside of us as well. And if we just realize how powerful we actually are, but at the same time, we have to realize how powerful we actually are in creating a reality. And if we are unconscious of the reality we're creating, which is exactly where Neptune retrograde is working either for us or against us right now. It really is. If we are unconscious, we are still substantiating those unconscious desires in a way that we may not be aware of until it is manifested later. So at least addressing why those things are coming up, or why you feel compelled to do so, is an important thing to do. So, love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow for the astrology report for the new moon, and have a great day. Love you. Bye.